Well, I was the superintendent of schools across the river here in Fairfax County when No Child Left Behind was passed. But a couple of years prior to that, when I had arrived in Fairfax to follow my good friend Bud Spillane, who's right here, Virginia was already engaged in student accountability, and we had a program still going on, known as the Standards of Learning, the SOLs. So we had already begun in Fairfax County a program of accountability that focused on our lowest performing schools. We actually were into school transformation in terms of trying to change our lowest performing schools. So when No Child Left Behind was passed, the concept of making sure that all of the kids were all performing at the level of achievement that we wanted to be was something that we all applauded. And after all, the bill itself was bipartisan. It had support from the Democrats. It had support from the Republicans. And it had a component, really, that many of us applauded in the field. And that was that for the first time, we were going to begin the process of disaggregating data. That no longer were we going to look at a school performance in terms of the average, which in Fairfax County was a unique situation because Fairfax County is such a large and diverse community that the averages hid what was going on. So we did have a number of low-performing schools that on the averages you wouldn't think Fairfax would have. And so the fact that now every school would have to report their data, not just an average, but how the children on free and reduced lunch were performing, how the kids on the special ed children were performing, the English as a second language learners, the special ed kids. All of those groups now, you would see their performance, and surprise, that performance was significantly below the average performance for that school. So that was good. That was very good that happened. And we owe that to No Child Left Behind. And for that, we need to be thankful. And that's one of the elements of accountability that should never go away. That has to remain. That has to stay. So the idea and the concept was right. It was good. It was something that all of us wanted to pursue. But as the years went by, what we began to see were issues emerging that really were not in line with, I think, the goal and the attempts and the concept of No Child Left Behind. For example, there were elements of how adequate yearly progress is computed that were problematic. Every district had to determine in their proposal to the state a number of students in each of these subcategories who would have to be tested in order for the school to make adequate yearly progress. Nothing to do with achievement, by the way, just making those numbers. All right. So we had in Fairfax, as many other school districts around the country over the years have had, outstanding schools who failed to make adequate yearly progress, not on the basis of student performance, but on the basis of the fact that a particular subgroup, most often either the special ed category or the limited English proficient category, not enough of the students were tested, and therefore automatically the school did not make adequate yearly progress, or the district for that matter. There are many other issues. I think Jennifer alluded to the gaming on the part of the states, because as every state had to provide a benchmark every year that was higher than the previous year, so that by 2014 all of the youngsters would be meeting the standards. Okay, as those benchmarks went up, the scores went down, and as the scores went down, so did the cut points on the state tests. So we see the comparison now. When you compare performance at the state level on the state test with performance on NAEP, there's a huge disparity there that immediately tells you that something is wrong, something isn't happening the way it should be. Then there were the punitive aspects of No Child Left Behind that kicked in. Today, for example, we still have in place the 20% set aside of Title I funds for supplementary educational services or choice that a district has to provide, where in spite of the fact that over the years that has not proven to be effective. As a matter of fact, Arnie Duncan, our Secretary of Education himself, asked for a waiver for that 20% set aside, specifically in terms of the supplementary educational services in Chicago. So there are many things that we have seen that are wrong with the program and need to be fixed. And everybody acknowledges that we have those problems, but nothing has happened. 4 years after this bill should have been reauthorized, it has not. I have little hope that it will be reauthorized anytime soon. So our association, the School Boards Association, and the 16 associations that make up the Learning First Alliance here in Washington, D.C., have petitioned the Secretary and Congress to bring about regulatory relief so that many of these compliances to AYP that are in place now are suspended until we have a new bill. And when we do have a new bill, accountability definitely has to be a component of that bill, but there are aspects of how AYP that need to go away. For example, one of the things that we propose is that we divide accountability into two pieces. That assessment should be based on assessment for the purpose of learning, which is what assessment is actually about in the schools, so that teachers know where the kids are at and what the needs of the kids are, and they can diagnose those needs and address instruction properly. That should be the major and most important piece of assessment. But then we can have an assessment component for accountability. And we have an excellent model in place right now called NAEP, the National Assessment for Educational Progress. It's the test right now that everyone, I guess, considers to be the closest thing to a national test, because it is. But NAEP is not administered to every child, every year, in every subject area. It's a random sampling of students. Something like that, a model like NAEP would be a great model for an accountability portion to state funding. And the other piece that would tie to that is that we are not supportive of the federal government holding accountable every school in every school system in the country, but rather they should hold accountable what initially ESEA was about, the schools that were recipient of federal funds.